No, the theme this month is inspired by the record heat in June. And Michelle's talk, Keeping Cool When the Heat is On. When she created this, in this last month, she explained different methods of keeping our spiritual cool when life happens to us, when stuff occurs, when there are bumps in the road, and when life heats up. And if you remember last week, Michelle wore this beautiful beige suit. She really looked trim, and she looked terrific. She got a lot of compliments. And she wore that 20 years ago when she was ushered in as the minister. So she was very, very proud of being able to wear that suit again. She's done a lot of work at the gym, and she's done a lot of great eating habits. So she was real proud to be able to wear that. Now, guys, on the other hand, have a little different perspective on clothes. And we can generally fit into about anything. I bought this. This is a Jerry Garcia. And I bought this weekend. I just wanted it to be hot. But the thing is that I realized that I can wear the same tie now that I wear in high school. So we don't have the same issues with clothes that women do. So it just works out that way. I don't know. No. Most people realize, or I have told, that this is really my time of the year. I love the heat. When it gets to be 80 and above, I'm in my nature. This is it. In fact, I put the top down on my convertible in March, generally when it's warm enough, and keep it down until about November. And I don't have to drive too far. I don't have a day job outside of my house. I work in my house. But I do drive around during the day, and I also take the dog out for a walk in the morning and in the afternoon, and generally around 4 o'clock. And the only time I really wear clothes, even long pants, well, I wear shirts and tank tops and shorts, but I'm generally running around barefoot, and I will take the dog out walking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the sidewalk barefoot. And I really love the heat. I love feeling it, and sometimes I even enjoy the smell of burning flesh, which is my own. But any event. Michelle mentioned last week that our air conditioner went out over the last weekend. And we have, when Michelle mentioned that, we have a brand new member who said, hey, I work for an air conditioning company. Give me a call. I had called 3 other places, and only one called me back saying that they would be able to see me on Monday. Well, we got Dennis Deppie and his company to come out, and they took measurements and brought a brand new unit in on Wednesday and installed a beautiful new unit for our house. It's very quiet, and he said it would be really extremely efficient, and we'd be saving a whole lot in our energy bills. Well, he didn't realize that we put solar on our house in November, and ever since then, Michelle tells me, and I don't handle the bills, but we have not paid more than $40 or under $40 every month. So I can't wait for the savings that we're going to have with this brand new unit. So, yes, well, he said we'll be paying SRP. So, they'll be paying us. They'll give us a couple $1,000 check every year. That'd be nice. Wouldn't be bad. Well, From the Frying Pan into the Fire is the title of my talk today. And the old adage, from the frying pan into the fire, means going from one bad situation into a worse one. In which Michelle asked me for an outline of my talk today, I wrote, From the Frying Pan into the Fire. A radical change in the temperature from pleasant to uncomfortable over a short period of time can be a shock. How we handle that shock can either be a flaming spiral downward or an annealing of our soul. I sent that to Michelle via email, and it went all the way about 10 feet to her office and next to mine, and she called out, she says, what does annealing mean? And I think you probably ought to change that word. And I said, Michelle, it's a relatively common word. I've used it for a long time, and I think it's the most appropriate one. And then I gave her a definition of it. I looked up the definition and said, Annealing is free from internal stress by heating and gradually cooling, or to toughen or temper, to toughen by applying extreme heat. So my talk today is expanding on this month's theme about when heat is applied to our lives, we think that we're going through a shock of some sort, and we may experience a shock by jumping from the frying pan into the fire. And through the process of annealing, we can strengthen who we are and show up in life better equipped to handle adversity. So, as many of you know, I teach a comparative religions class here. And I bring up examples of how other religions handle situations. And Hinduism has been in existence for about 5,000 years. And Hindus will say that they have individual gods. Some Hindus will say that these are totally separate gods that work independently. And other Hindus will say, no, it is just manifestation of one God. Just as we believe that love and support and creativity is all manifestations of the unity of God. Well, Agni is one of the highest gods in the Hindu religion. And Agni is the purifier of all that he touches. And he's the god of fire and sacrifice, divine knowledge, etc. So in this instance, in fact, Agni is the root word is fire in Sanskrit is the root word in Sanskrit, and Agni is the root word also from which we get ignite. So we have common references there. So in this instance, the flame can be thought of as strengthening that which it touches. And sometimes we willingly jump into the fire, and sometimes we're pushed. And I was pushed. But regardless of whether we find meaning in the most painful experiences of our lives or not, life actually brings us what we need when we need it, even though we don't necessarily agree at the time or are even aware of it. So my story today will illustrate my flaming descent into the annealing of my soul, and I hope it is of illustrative purpose to you. I got divorced from my first wife after 7 years of marriage, and it really wasn't meant to be from the very beginning. I was in love with the idea of being in love, and I met my first wife on, I asked her to go riding, and little realizing that that is what she taught. She taught riding to Paul Newman's kids. She taught writing to Linda Blair of The Exorcist. She taught writing to Doc Severinsen's kids. And so I took her out writing, and I thought I'd impress her with my writing ability. And here she teaches hunting and jumping. So here we go, jumping over that I had not done before. But it was thrilling. It was really a lot of fun. And I just kind of got caught up in all of that. We met in November, and after the second date, we decided to get married, and got married in June of that same year, 1973. And I didn't know oops at the time, but I thought that I would take her on a storybook honeymoon. And a storybook honeymoon to me was Paris and Saint-Tropez. So Paris is in the center of, or the northern part of France, and Saint-Tropez is on the Riviera. And I had been there a year before with another girl altogether, and there may be a pattern built here. So we went and discovered, we had not lived together, we had discovered that we were from two completely different worlds, and we had really very little in common. But by the time that we came back home, I was ready to give her back to her father. We just weren't compatible. It wasn't that she was a bad person or that I was bad. We were not compatible. But I grew up as a product of a broken home. My parents were divorced when I was 3 years old. And I decided that I did not want to carry on that pattern. And it would be a tragedy for me to get divorced. So we kind of slugged it out and made it through. We made it through 7 years. And we finally decided that this was really a waste of our lives to be this unhappy. And we were just making each other miserable. So we got divorced, and her parents had moved out here about a year or so after I moved out in 75. And we didn't tell her parents for a year. We kind of kept it together only because her parents loved me so much, and I was the only boy in the family, that we just did not want to disappoint them. But it happened, and there it goes. Well, I started dating not too terribly soon afterwards, but I was afraid of making a commitment. I just didn't want to be hurt again. So I always had one foot out of the relationship and never really was able to commit to anybody. So I had a series of dates, and then I met Jean. Jean was really a special person, really beautiful and talented, but she was a night person. She was a disco queen, and she would kind of wake up at 9 o'clock at night, and we would go out dancing on the weekends. We'd take disco lessons and hit the various bars and delight, actually, the people that we were dancing with and in front of. But at the same time, I kept dating other people also, and for short periods of time. And Jean and I would take country swing lessons when country swing became popular in the early 90s. And we would fly up to Flagstaff, as I was a pilot, and so we could go away, and I would be sure that I didn't mix with other girls that I was dating down in Phoenix. So we'd go up to Flagstaff, and it was a lot of fun to get caught up in that also. So with the other girls, I would become unavailable primarily after they said, "Would you like to meet my parents?" And I said, well, no, this is getting a little bit too serious. So I kept on dating Jean, had more girlfriends, and so on. And one day in about 1988, I met Lisa. And we started to date, and she was Earth Mother. She would get up at 6 in the morning. We would go bike riding. She would make breakfast for me. And so she was completely different. I mean, just a world apart of Jean. And so we had a wonderful thing going, too. And so I started dating her exclusively also. So... Anyway, I had a business at this time, and one of my employees said, "You're living my dream." And I said, "No, it's not what you think. I mean, I really like both of these girls, and I just can't commit. I don't know which one to gravitate towards, and either of them would be a great mate, but I just can't make up my mind." So I would be able to, over this essentially dating both Lisa and Michelle over 2.5 years, we'll erase that. Lisa and Jean over 2.5 years, we would have occasions that our worlds might collide. Say, for example, I would be out at a shopping mall, and I would take Lisa with me, and we'd be going shopping, and then she'd go off on one direction to visit a store that she wanted, and I would walk this way, and as soon as I turned the corner, there's Jean's brother. Whoops. And if I had been a little late on that, I would have some explaining to do. So one evening, I was just saying goodbye to Lisa, and she was leaving my back door, and there was a knock on my front door, and it was Jean. And she needed my assistance because her water heater had broken in her apartment. I mean, it was just that quick. And we also had Christmas and Thanksgiving. And it was fortunate that Jean and her family loved to eat late, like 4, 5, 6 in the evening. And Lisa's family, she and her brothers loved to eat early. So we would have an early Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, and then I'd have a late Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner. Oh, this was taxing. This was... So I decided I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision one way or another. And I had to leave the country to do it because I couldn't do it here in Arizona. So I went to Zihuatanejo, a Club Med down on the southern coast of Mexico. And I was there for 2 weeks. And the first week I met a woman. And she was a newscaster out of Texas. And so we developed a relationship, and they carried on for several weeks until I realized that it's unconscionable to have three girlfriends. I mean, you just can't do it. It's just a little unrealistic. So, my 40th birthday was coming around, and an epic event. But just before that, in 1988, I had gallbladder surgery. And at that time, they didn't have the arthroscopic surgery that they do now, where they just go in a little bit. I had a slice about 6 or 8 inches out of my abdomen like that. And they went in with big tools and pulled it out. I was very careful to say to both of the women, I don't want anybody visiting me in the hospital. So I was coming out of the anesthetic after the surgery, and Jean showed up. She just wanted to be there. And she decided not to startle me, so because I was kind of sleeping. So she touched me on my feet, and I went, like that. Oh, can you imagine being sliced in half? And then that... But I didn't get mad. I didn't have the presence of mind to get mad, but I just had a phone call at that very moment from Lisa. And so I had to remember to think about no names. Yes, I'm just going to say yes, no, and I'm really tired, and try to leave it at that. Fortunately, I got through that. But my 40th birthday was coming around. Now, Lisa threw a surprise party for me the week before my birthday because she had to, fortunately, go back to Michigan to visit with her father. So she invited 2 of my friends, well, actually employees, and their wives. So we had a nice little party. On my birthday, Jean threw a surprise party for me. Those same 2 couples, as well as several others, showed up. They never revealed anything, but the wives were not happy, and the guys were just smiling like crazy. Look at this. Oh, they couldn't believe it. So anyway, and I think a couple movies have been made about that. Then one evening it happened. Lisa came to the back door, knocked on the door, and I went to it and opened up the door, and I said, oh, come on in. And she says, well, you probably remember a friend of yours. And there was Jean. Lisa had followed me. They were living within 2 miles of each other, and I was right in the middle. My apartment was in the middle between Jean and Lisa's. Jean had no idea that I was dating all these other women. Lisa had found Jean, had called her up, had met, they exchanged stories, and they both came over at once. Well, I was relieved. I was honestly relieved. I was beaten within an inch of my life verbally with this, but I really had jumped from the frying pan into the fire, and I felt so relieved. It was humiliating, and it was devastating. But I was honestly relieved. I don't know how long they were there, but by the time they left, I was just broken and strangely lifted up at the same time. And saying, oh, totally single. Dating was not in the realm of possibility after this, not at all. However, I had been living a lie all this time, and I had to tell the truth. Now, I had been going to a counseling session with Jean. She had wanted me to get out of this fear of commitment, so we went to counseling. And we'd gone to counseling for about a year. Well, Jean dropped out after the first few months because, she didn't have a problem, and I did. However, I had been lying to this group for an entire year, and I decided that I needed to go back and tell the truth. So one of the most difficult things that I'd ever done in my life was sit in the middle of 12 people and tell them that I had been lying to them and paying for it, paying good money to go once a week to lie to these people about me and my relationships. Well, that was humiliating, and it was devastating and humbling, but most of all, it was freeing. It really freed me from this lie. It freed me from this weight off of my shoulders. So you'd figure that that's all I really needed, was to be confronted by two women that I had wronged and this group that I had lied to. But a couple of days later, I got a call from the police that my office had been broken into. And it must have been kids. They smashed the window, climbed in, and they destroyed some furniture and stuff, and they took some toys that I had, really nice toys, and my stereo system, but they didn't take my computer. And so I went through that Saturday day and afternoon compiling a list for my insurance company and taking stock of my life and sweeping up the glass, not only of the shattered glass of my office, but the shattered glass of my life. And I went home to my apartment. So you'd figure that being confronted by your two girlfriends and then going into a group and giving your all to them, opening your soul to them, and then having your office be broken into is enough. Well, I went home to find that my apartment was broken into while I was at my office. Stuff was strewn all over the place. Clothes were stolen. Some beautiful items that I had were stolen. I went from room to room looking through, surveying damage, and just sort of going, oh my God, what could be next? I went into the kitchen and I reached for the phone, only to realize they had stolen the phone. I was totally alone. I couldn't even call the police from outside. I was totally devastated. So my ego was singed away, and my psyche was a blank slate. So the phrase, life brings us exactly what we need when we need it. If anybody would have said that to me at the time, I would be put in jail for a battery, because I did not believe it, and I had no idea that was the state that I was in, and that I should really be grateful for all this going on. So my life was quenched with a huge wave crashing over me, not once but 4 times, and I felt as if I had a spiritual enema. I mean, this was something. But you can't rise up out of the ashes without first being burnt to the ground. And so from these series of events, I was mentally completely spent, but I was at last really relieved, and I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore. I could freely go any place I wanted, but boy, I didn't want to go anyplace. My soul was being annealed by the fire that I had just passed through, and I didn't know that it was an annealing. I thought I was just being beat up. I was caught between the old way of life and a new way of life. And I'm conducting this book review of Secrets of the Lost Art of Prayer by Greg Braden. And this last week, we centered on blessing. And blessing is an opportunity for us to not look at things as they were or even as they are, but take into that position right in the very, very middle that allows you to just be, just see. And I was right in the middle of the way things were and had no idea about the way things were going to be. And it just happened that I went back to work that next week and met Michelle. Michelle came into my life just in that center, in that blessing period that allowed me to just kind of be there. Now, she can tell you all the details of our first meeting. But just for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to tell you that I had absolutely no thought of dating her. I had no thought of dating any woman ever again. She wrote me a letter after we met, and I probably still had a little charisma left. She wrote me a letter and said that she'd like to meet on a more personal basis because we had met on a business basis. And so we went out on a first date, which was just really nice, dinner and dancing. We had a great time on Halloween of 1998, or 99, 98, 89. 1989. There we go. I'm still friend. 1989. Had a terrific time. And we had a second date. And the second date, I decided I was going to be completely truthful with her. And I told her all about my past, and I let the chips fall where they may. Well, she laid out her past, and we said, oh, we're both kind of broken up here, aren't we? There may be something going on here. So we both needed to do some independent psychological work, which we did to show up in strength together. So most of you are familiar with Michelle's story about how she came to realize that she was the common element in a series of failed relationships herself. And now you know a little bit more about mine. If it weren't for the trials that we both went through, we would not be in this sweet relationship that we have had for more than 25 years. Our marriage, more than 25 years, in our relationship, longer than that. But if we had not gone through the trial by fire and both of us be essentially burnt out, we would not be able to come to this. So, it takes the darkness to be really aware of the light. And when metal is forged by fire, it becomes stronger. And believe it or not, our souls react the same way. There is a P.S. to the story, a P.S. with Jean. I never heard from Lisa again, but in about 2004, I got a letter from Jean. And she said that she realized that it took two dysfunctional people to make a dysfunctional relationship. She had forgiven me just as she had forgiven herself, and just wanted to say hi, and that all was essentially forgiven. Well, with Michelle's blessing, we got together with coffee, maybe once a couple times a month, and shared what had happened over the previous 15 years. Now, Jean was always into music, and she loved the music of the 60s and the 70s. And by this time, she started doing a blog, and she would go visit Three Dog Night, or she'd visit the Moody Blues. She'd go to L.A. and set in sessions with some of the better-known musicians and start documenting who they were, and got to have friends in the musical business. Well, she really enjoyed that, and there were a series of concerts that were done by PBS in 2004, 2005. And in those, you've got the old bands and huge auditoriums. And generally in the front, you can see Jean. I saw Jean in several of these documentaries and videos. And however, in June of 2006, she started having pain in the base of her spine, or base of her neck here. And she'd always been very athletic. We did aerobics together. In fact, she did parachuting with me, and she was only about 90 pounds. And I remember coming down first, and then she jumped out, and one of the guys says, "Look, she's going back up." I mean, she was so light, she went back up for just a little bit. Well, she was diagnosed with cancer. She had cancer of the spine. And she started to go through chemo. And chemo just wasn't for her. It made her deathly ill. And so she decided not to do that. She just had one session of chemo. This was June of 2006. And by the end of July, she was in hospice. and it had really eaten through her spine, and she couldn't move. She couldn't even move her head. And so I spent many hours with her. She wanted me to do her memorial, her celebration of life. And so we started charting that out. And she got telephone calls and letters from all kinds of people. In fact, Barry Manilow called her and sang her a song that he had written to her over the phone. And she was that well loved. So she went through some of the most extreme pain she could still feel, but she never complained. She was always there essentially with a smile on her face, and she was always concerned with other people. She died the first week, made her transition the first week of August. So it was from June to August that she had been diagnosed and suffered and made her transition. And I was out of town. I was on a dive trip to the Turks and Caicos and was not able to do her memorial. But she was well loved, and she was truly a beautiful soul. So each of us has degrees of heat that we must endure. Some of us have been driven to the edge of the frying pan, and some of us have jumped in willingly. But the first book of James, let me see. Where am I? I'm sorry. I know that each of us can get through this by ourselves with help, but the trials that we face, we can get through them in better shape than we thought possible. Now, Shannon Adler is a contemporary writer, and her message is that she wants to be an inspirational author, and she wants to have the most number of inspirational quotes on Goodreads. And to date, she has more than 1,200, which is outpacing Dr. Phil, John Gray, Dr. Laura, and other relationship gurus. And what I would like to do is read to you the following inspirational message. But I would like to have you not just listen to the words, but feel them for yourself, because this is a message to you. So if you would just sort of sit back and relax and feel the words. It's entitled, Hey You. You are beautiful. You are talented. You are blessed. You are gifted. You are smart. You are funny. You are fun. You are loving. You are lovable. You are unique. You are special. But most of all, you are strong and will get through this because there are others that have gone through something similar. Look for them because they are looking for you. And in the first book of James, James 1, 2 through 4, it's read, Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So I didn't have this church 30 years ago when I was going through those trials by fire. And if I had the loving presence of the ministers and the spiritual life coaches and simply the congregation and this community, life would have been a whole lot easier and a whole lot better. So I certainly hope that my illustration of my going through fire allows you to tap into the support that you can find here at Creative Living Fellowship. That is what we are here for. We're here for your support, and each and every one of us is here for that. So you're not alone. We want to make sure that your trials and tribulations, whatever they are, will help you lead a better life and the annealing of the soul that you need to go from success that you seek and desire to greater success. So thank you. Let us pray now. Recognizing the omnipresence of God, I am filled with an awareness of spirit. I rest assured that I live, move, and have my being in God. As I walk in spirit, I feel that power within me. I am calm and confident as I look upon my life from this higher perspective. The struggles and problems in life drop away and leave my path to one of ease and fulfillment. I find strength and answers to move forward in the direction of my choosing. As I enter this next and deeper stage of spiritual growth, I am courageous in expressing the truth about myself and honest with what I see. I am open to greater insights, revealing the patterns of my path so far. I feel a compassionate understanding for who I was and what I have done on my journey through life. I honor myself for the best I have been able to do. From this point on, I consciously tell the truth about myself. I am confident with my decisions, knowing that they come from Spirit. I am filled with a sense of appreciation for this divine right action, unfolding appropriately, as my life expresses its connection with Spirit. I say thank you for all that I experience. I surrender these words to the law, which supports me unfailingly. I let go and let God, and so it is.